So we begin tonight by wishing Mike Vrabel a happy 50th birthday. He celebrated on the field today by putting himself actually into a scrum during practice between the Minnesota Vikings and the New England Patriots a little bit earlier. Look, there are only very few coaches in the National Football League that, quite frankly, are big enough, strong enough, and have enough, if you will, culture building experience behind them to actually pull something like this off. Hey, welcome to the NFL Rundown. As always, I'm Dave DeBaugh, coming to you from the Silicon Valley. Now, as we all know, culture building in the National Football League is something that a lot of people, quite frankly, just don't believe in. But if you take a look at where the Miami Dolphins are today with Mike McDaniel as their head coach, and as good a head coach as he is, as nice a guy and as funny and witty as he is with the media, can you say confidently that there has been a culture built in Miami that actually is resulting in winning? You know, when we look at some of the great coaches in the National Football League today, certainly culture building is a big part of how they actually have succeeded to this point. Just look at Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. Who would have ever guessed that the Detroit Lions would win a division and actually go all the way to an NFC championship game, and then to be followed up the next year as actually being a Super Bowl favorite? Now, of course, that didn't happen, but still, when we think about Dan Campbell and the impression that he put on the Detroit Lions in year one and, quite frankly, year two of his tenure there, it was that toughness. Everybody could see that while Detroit kept losing and losing and losing initially, that the team was playing hard. And when players play hard, eventually things will turn around for you. Like it's in business when you actually start a new company, and I've been part of several startups over the years. I can tell you that at the very beginning, you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to set a culture amongst the employees that actually work for your company. It's the only way that you can succeed. Now, I've certainly been part of several, and I do mean several successful companies over the years. And when I watch head coaches in the National Football League get introduced to the media, and I watch their practices, and I watch them go through the first 6 months or the first 12 months of their career as a head coach in the National Football League, it generally becomes pretty obvious who's actually going to have staying power as a head coach in the National Football League and who isn't, despite how wacky and bad that particular organization is. Look, Mike Vrabel hung out with the Tennessee Titans for quite some time, and I don't think any of you have the Tennessee Titans amongst the top NFL organizations, do you? So certainly there's been a lot of talk about how Drake May is responding to the tough love of Mike Vrabel. But it's not just that. It's the culture that Mike Vrabel is bringing back to New England that's actually the reason why so many people in the media, despite, quite frankly, the New England Patriots roster, which is average at best at this point, is why so many people have the Patriots with an outside chance of actually making the playoffs this year. Look, I saw the Patriots play plenty last year, and if they had actually kept the coach that they had last season, I'd confidently tell you, do not bet any dollars on the Patriots having any chance of making the playoffs this year. Look, coaching matters, and one of the reasons it matters is because of the culture that a coach actually decides to set. It's the same reason I believe the Las Vegas Raiders and Pete Carroll are actually going to make some noise this year. Now, look, I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to the playoffs, but you know that that Raider football team is going to play hard. And if Pete Carroll can keep coaching the Raiders for, 2 or 3 years, one of those years he'll get them in the playoffs. And that's because Pete Carroll is a proven head coach in both college and the National Football League, and he knows how to build a winning culture. Same can be said, of course, for Sean McVay. It was obvious post Super Bowl that the Rams were probably not going to be very good for a couple years. And now we're a couple years removed from that. And everybody knows that the Los Angeles Rams are a dangerous team once again. We saw what they did in the playoffs last year for a team that wasn't actually expected to make the playoffs. Quite frankly, this Los Angeles Rams roster from top to bottom is significantly better than it was last year. The one big downside with the Rams at this point, of course, is potentially the health concerns that the team, as well as the fans and the media, have for Matthew Stafford at this point. That aside, I'm sure Jimmy G, if he needs to play in 4 or 5 games, can certainly do a good enough job to keep the Rams afloat. But why are the Rams once again a good team in the National Football League after they had to tear everything down after the Super Bowl victory? And the reason for that is it's the Sean McVay culture that he's built. Go listen to some of his halftime speeches, and you too would want to run through walls for Sean McVay. Sean McVay is not as big as Mike Vrabel. They're different, and there's different ways of building great cultures on teams in the National Football League. Mike Vrabel has a way, and I got to tell you, Pete Carroll's way is a completely different way of building culture. But still, the outcome that Pete Carroll has had from a success standpoint throughout his career is equal to that, if not further, at least as a head coach at this point for Mike Vrabel. Vrabel certainly will have a chance, though, once again, to return the New England Patriots back to a Super Bowl winning culture. And if he can do that with Drake May, who is not Tom Brady, that would certainly lead a lot of people to believe that the coaching really does truly matter in the National Football League, which I think we all know, but sometimes are willing to ignore. Look, the Dolphins do not look good. The Dolphins, I caught some of the Dolphins training camp today scrimmage today against the Detroit Lions, and it was absolutely horrific. There's one guy that has built a culture which has proven to be successful, which has taken his team all the way to an NFC championship game. There's another guy who, by the way, is one of the nicest guys in the National Football League and one of the smartest guys in the NFL. But his culture is different, and that was proven today on the practice field. All right. I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions on this particular topic. I know a lot of you out there probably don't believe in culture, but quite frankly, it is that culture that actually makes these teams actual teams that can do damage in the playoffs.